For more on this, we're joined in Brisbane by Senior Law Lecturer at Griffith University, Shakram Dana. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
On what basis does the Trump White House want to stop people counting votes?
Well, this isn't a surprise to anyone that they're going to go into Pennsylvania and try to get the vote counting to stop. I mean, he signaled this when he came out and declared himself the winner of Pennsylvania when there was still large numbers of votes still to be counted. This would be like declaring the winner of the state of origin game at halftime, right? And then saying that all the tries scored in the second half don't count. And somehow, if I end up losing when all the playing time is done, I've been cheated out of a win. So there is no result until all the votes have been counted. And they're going to go into, for example, Pennsylvania, and try to get a stay and stop the counting of the votes.
Okay, but they're going to, when they meet the judge, they're going to have to come up with some reason for it. And what reason are they going to give?
Well, I think the most likely reason they're going to give is that earlier what had happened was the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, taking into consideration the coronavirus and an attempt to make the voting safer, extended the absentee ballot process, or voting by absentee or voting by mail. And one thing that they did is they extended the time for those votes to arrive. So if a mail-in ballot was mailed before the election date or on the election date, but arrived after the election date, the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania has ordered the officials to count those votes.
Okay, so this is going to be, in 2000 there was a big debate in Florida about hanging chads on old-fashioned voting machines where you had to sort of punch a hole in the voting card, and if the little piece of paper didn't come out the back. Now it seems we've got many Floridas over and over again, and it's about postmarks and signatures and all the rest of it. But Donald Trump's not saying, I want to go to the local court, so each election is run in each state. There's not a national election in that sense. He wants to go to the local courts. He'd have to go to the local courts. What are the prospects of him getting to the US Supreme Court and getting anywhere with these objections? And may I say, a recount in Wisconsin would seem pretty reasonable given how tight it is, but would he ever get the thing to the US Supreme Court?
Well, the recount in Wisconsin is one that actually Wisconsin law allows for. So Wisconsin law says that if there is a close margin between the candidates, one candidate does, by right, have the opportunity to ask for a recount. What's happening in Pennsylvania, and you mentioned what happened in Florida in 2000 with the hanging chads, there is an important difference between what happened in Florida and what is going on now in Pennsylvania. Florida, the Supreme Court of the United States stepped in to stop a recount. That's not what's happening in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, we're talking about the first count, the initial count. So there is a significant difference between those two cases. On the other hand, there is a similarity. And the similarity is that the Bush v. Gore precedent was about the reason the Supreme Court was able to step in and stop that recounting was based on the Equal Protection Clause. The Supreme Court said that because what they're going to do in Florida is do the recount differently in different counties, that violates the Equal Protection Clause. Everyone should have their vote counted the same way. So in Pennsylvania, the problem we have in Pennsylvania is that the Pennsylvania laws on this are all over the place. Every county has different instructions on how it would recount the votes in the event that a recount is called for. And the recount is determined by county depending on how the actual vote was counted was cast in the first place.
Oh, for goodness sakes, this is ridiculous.
It's quite complicated. It's quite complicated in Pennsylvania.
It does sound like
But remember, the important thing...
It sounds like a lawyer's picnic, Shakram. It sounds like a lawyer's picnic, and the clock is ticking. And I want you to tell me whether this is going to continue.
The reason we get paid so much is because nobody knows what's going on, right? That's why we get paid so much. But the important thing to remember in Pennsylvania is that we're not talking about a recount like we were in Florida in 2000. In Pennsylvania, we're talking about the first count. That's one thing that's important to remember. The second thing that's important to remember is that these voters in Pennsylvania who followed what the state officials said and relied on the instructions that were given that they could mail their ballots and it would be accepted up to 3 days after, if it arrived up to 3 days after the election day, they should not be penalized.
Yeah.
They've been following what they were told by their state officials. So the Supreme Court, if it does get involved, it's going to be very, very tricky. Because while it can say that maybe the state court of Pennsylvania didn't have the authority to extend the deadline, because by rule it should be done by the legislator, you can't now go and penalize the voters who followed and relied on that. So the Supreme Court of the United States is going to be in a very difficult situation where it could determine that what the Pennsylvania courts have done and officials have done is unlawful, but it can't now disenfranchise or take away the votes from those who followed those rules. So,
okay. Let me just very quickly to the panel. Peter Hartship, very quickly on this, because thank goodness